Hey, and welcome to a special episode of The Big Boys. You got your auntie's favorite uncle, Uncle Neely, that's me, joined by my man, Coach Carl Reed from 24/7 Sports. Our main guy, Tolly Carr, he's on assignment doing some other duties right now. He'll be back with us, but things are moving so fast and so fervently. You like the ACT word, Coach?
Hey, listen, you got to understand them kind of words to pass the ACT.
Yeah, it's culturally biased, they say.
Mhm.
I believe it too. But just, man, things are going so hot and heavy. We want to just make sure we hop on this week and drop some updates to you guys and talk Colorado football, talk CFP picture, you name it. We're going to cover it today. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Man, if you are ever in need of a hard to find ticket, I don't care if it's a Colorado football game, because those are sold out every week, NFL, NBA, it could be a concert or comedy show. You go to Game Time, download the app, create you an account, and if you use the code BUFFS, the big boys, that's me and Carl Reed, we're going to take $20 off your first purchase. While you're online, you get to see your seats, you get to see the view. There's no hidden fees. It's gonna come right to your phone, and you're gonna get in that event when everybody's standing outside. How you gonna hate from outside the club? I don't know. But Game Time is gonna get you in. Coach Carl Reed, what's going on, brother?
Man, everything is going good, man. It's an exciting time in the college football season for sure, my brother.
Yes, absolutely. I remember just a short while ago that Colorado was predicted during the preseason polls to be number 11 in the Big 12, and here they are sitting in sole possession of number two spot.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, the people that were predicting that, they didn't know what Coach Prime was building. Anytime you had two guys that are going to be top five picks in the draft, that are in the Heisman Trophy race, the way that both Shador and Travis are, you know you're going to win you some football games. But the big thing, and we've talked about it before, they've improved the offense and defensive line on both sides. And when the season got off to a slow start for the O line, people don't realize how long it can take that group to jail. But Coach Phil has them boys coming off the ball right now in the run game and moving their feet in the pass game. That line is much improved on both sides.
Whether it's Coach Phil Loadholt's play in his day all the way up to Minnesota, where he literally was the guy who reset the market for his position, and had a nice payday because of his skill set. But coaching at Ole Miss, coaching in Oklahoma, all the skills he brings to the table, a lot of people were doubting, saying, here's a guy who's never had his own room before. Who in the world is Coach Prime hiring? And then he brought in this philosophy of we're going to have some interchangeability in this offensive line, and people really lost their minds. But guess who's gotten proven right? Because there's only been like one or two sacks a game these past four games compared to seven this time last year. I don't think Coach Phil Loho gets enough credit for what he's done revamping his offensive line.
Well, when I think about Coach Loadholt, I have a great relationship with the guys at the University of Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley's a good friend of mine. Bill Beatonbow, the offensive line coach at Oklahoma, and they've always raved about Coach Loadholt and what he did. He was a very key figure in building the trenches at the University of Oklahoma, and they had a great run there where they were just sending a bunch of offensive linemen to the NFL. So when Coach Prime was able to reach down into Norman, Oklahoma, and pull him out and bring him to Boulder, I knew it was going to be a big time hire for the Buffs.
Yeah, one of the things Coach Prime just constantly points out to people, because they say the same thing on the defensive side of the ball with defensive coordinator Rob Livingston, that he never had a quote unquote room. Coach Prime said, man, y'all got to understand and stop looking at these titles. The title just shows where people can find you in the building. A lot of these folks have titles, but they're actually the ones doing the work. I went after guys that were doing the work, and I trusted people that made recommendations and told me, what they brought to the organization. And just like that offensive line, look what this defense for Colorado is doing, giving up about 100 yards less per game than this time last year, only allowing about 7 points in the second half the entire season.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. I know when he was going through the interview process for defensive coordinators, and there were a few guys who came in and had an opportunity to meet with him and the staff. He raved to me about the organization of Coach Livingston. He had his plan, his base defense, his coverages, his man coverages, his zone coverages, his even fronts and his odd fronts. He had it so detailed all the way down to the drills that each position was going to be running. He had his plan laid out and he has executed it flawlessly.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things he did during the interview is Coach Prime gave him a game that we lost and said, "Tell me what you would have done looking at this game." And he broke that film down and came up with some suggestions because one of the things about his philosophy is it's not a system that he's cramming to the players. He's evaluating the individual talents of his players, getting the best collective of 11 out there and letting them do their thing.
And a lot of people don't understand how critical that is because you're going to play against all kind of different teams. You're going to play teams that do a lot of 11 personnel, maybe they in 12, teams that play 10 personnel. So you got double tights, you got no backs, you got 2x2, 3x1. Some people play with an H back. And depending on what each team does, your defense has to be able to adjust to that so you can understand how to run fit first and foremost. Run, stopping the run is the key to the beginning of the game and then how you're going to defend the pass on the back end.
You know, when you look at what happened in let's say, the first quarter or second quarter of this season, particularly that loss to Nebraska, the way this team has rebounded in jail since then, you know, you're a former coach, former champion at coaching. What is it about that kind of loss that can really bring a team together?
Well, you had two choices when you lose a game like that. You can either band together or you can blame everyone else. And
Mm.
this team really banded together and they proved that they wanted to win. I think last year's team probably folds and guys get to pointing fingers, but this year's team say, listen, yeah, we have NFL aspirations. We have some individual things that we want to do. You know, we want our NIL money, our NFL money, but we came here also to win. They wanted to win for Coach Prime. They wanted to win for each other. They wanted to win for their team and the university. So I think that the right guys from a character standpoint are in the locker room, and that's made a lot of difference this season.
You know, people ask me all the time when I'm back home in Mississippi or traveling with the team during the schedule, or just anywhere here in Colorado, in line at the grocery store, what's the biggest difference that I see between this team and last year? And it's easy to point at, you know, individual talent and the coaching changes, but I think it's what you're touching on. It's responsibility and accountability. So many times last year when we were getting a tough spot, everybody was pointing fingers at the other unit and what they did wrong. Now you have a locker room full of guys that their first thing is, what did I do or not do on that play? What did my unit not do on that play? It's not a lot of finger pointing and folding like you had a year ago. It's accountability and responsibility and moving to the next play.
And your leaders are some of the best people that you can find too. And so that pushes the culture in the locker room, man. And when guys decide that they want to win, you can accomplish a lot of things in football. And also, the staff changes that were made, bringing in
Mhm.
guys like Coach Livingston, Coach Load, adding a Damian Lewis and Warren Sapp to the defensive side of the ball, it brings the edge, it brings the intensity. Coach Dancy is growing up right before our eyes. So we got a lot going on at the University of Colorado right now that's very good from a football standpoint.
Yeah, when you look at that coaching staff, man, a number of coaches in that building have been head coaches or coordinators. You look at Michael Pollock, offensive analyst. He was a coordinator at Jackson State, been a head coach at the high school level. You look at Coach Flea, was head coach at Howard, just like he is here at Colorado, was assistant head coach at Jackson State as well. Coach Vincent Dancy, that you just mentioned, was head coach at Mississippi Valley State when he formed that true relationship with Coach Prime. And speaking of Coach Dancy, one of the things I've eyeballed and seen is when you have D. Lou over the D line, Sapp coming in as an analyst, and then Dancy moved up to be defensive end coach. But get this, Coach Reed, that's not three separate rooms. They've moved all their guys into the same room, so we're talking the same language from the same script. Every now and then they may break off and do some individual things, but that entire decent defensive front is in one room together now.
And I'm gonna tell you what, I visited a lot of colleges over the years. The fact that you can have Dancy, Lewis, and Sapp do that goes to also show you their selflessness and that there's no egos involved. Most guys want to be in there by themselves with their guys, and ego becomes a factor, but those guys have gelled together like glue.
Like glue, like glue, like glue. Coach, I wasn't all that great math, but if it's 12 games in a season and you got three left, that means you're in the fourth quarter. We're sitting here with 3 games left. We got Utah coming to town. We go to Kansas and play them at Arrowhead Stadium. And then Thanksgiving, Black Friday, we got Oklahoma State. Colorado wins out, guaranteed the second spot. You don't have to worry about what some other people do or don't do in the scenario to help you. You control your own destiny in this fourth quarter. And you know the old saying in coach speak, they remember November. Talk to us about what needs to happen this month in November.
Man, I was talking to somebody last night, Neely, and I told them this. They say, man, Colorado's going to play for the Big 12 championship. It's going to be live in Dallas. Reed, are you going to be there? I say, wait a minute, man. We got Utah on Saturday. You
Hmm.
got to focus on one game at a time. You can't play the Big 12 championship into the Big 12 championship. You got to lock in right now. You got to focus on what you have to do to beat Utah, who's going to be a formidable opponent. And a lot
Absolutely.
of people look at records, you look at this. Football is about matchups, and Utah can match up with you in the trenches. You don't want to overlook them. They have a great coach in Kyle Whittingham. Let's take care of business about in Utah, and then we'll talk about Kansas next week.
I would love to do that right now. Just talk about Utah because they are next up, and the goal, as always, is to go 1-0 each week. Utah, I think, is coming in here a wounded animal. They shoulda, coulda, woulda beat BYU that had to leave a bad taste in their mouth. They understand for them to get a bowl game, put the Big 12 championship aside just to get the 4 wins, they have to mathematically beat us to get there. They're coming in a wounded animal, a cornered beast. They're in the top 10 in points allowed on their defense in the red zone. You can look at their record and think they're a pushover, but Utah brings a lot to the table.
Well, they're very well coached. They have an excellent football coach and they have a tradition of winning. So they're going to come in and they're going to be competitive and they're not going to lay down. But if you want to beat them, you're going to have to beat them. And we have the guys at the skill positions. I don't think that they can guard us on the perimeter, but they can play well within the trenches. You got to play mistake-free football and you got to put them away early because when a team is down, you got to keep them down. You don't want to let them up off the mat.
Absolutely. And although we are the home team, they have to come to Folsom Field. We finally got a morning kickoff at 10 a.m., which kind of coincides with our practice time. So that's going to be big noon kickoff. It's going to be a noon game on the East Coast. But Utah doesn't have a fear of Folsom. I know that college football has changed so much, with the collectives and the NIL and the transfer portal. A team you're playing now is not a team from last year, let alone 2 years ago. But when you look at the past 15 years, Utah is not afraid of Colorado. They have the numbers. They're going to come in here believing.
Utah isn't afraid of anybody. They've got a winning history going all the way back to when Urban Meyer was the coach. Man, they were bludgeoning people, and they play a physical style. They have a linebacker in Landon Burton that I think is going to be a first round pick, and I've been enjoying watching him play since high school. He's one of those throwback type of linebackers, so he's going to try to get in there and get real physical. They've had some quarterback inconsistency, but when you're playing for a program that expects to win, that's a factor. They're not just going to lay down.
At all. I said coming off that Nebraska loss that everything that this program had as goals, that Coach Prime, the head coach, said his goals was still on the table. One, get Miss Peggy to a bowl game. That takes 6 wins. Get to the Big 12 championship. You're at the threshold to accomplish that because you got to be number one or number two to go to Dallas on December 7th. And the person who wins that game gets a seat in the CFP. Let's talk CFP for a second because I got to tell you, Coach Reed, when I talked about everything for this team still being on the table after the Nebraska loss, I had no idea college football playoffs right now was going to look like this. I think Big 12 is going to get a seat, that winner of the game, of course. But you got the SEC out there and the ACC. Some of these conferences are going to have multiple teams in it. In fact, whoever's in the championship game, the winner and loser are both going.
Yeah, the SEC and the Big Ten are both going to have multiple teams. It's up in the air. What happens in the ACC and the Big 12? I think the conference game winner gets to go, and then you're going to have a group of five at large in there as well. But one thing about it, it's got to feel good in Colorado because right now you're in control of your own destiny. You went out, you in the Big 12 championship, you take care of business, you will be in the college football playoffs. And even if you go to the Big 12 championship and lose a close one, business is business. And you might have to see if everybody wants Coach Prime's Buffaloes in the playoffs still, because they have been a huge draw no matter where they are at home or away.
You got to imagine those bowl sponsors are just salivating every time Coach Prime adds to the win. Two more things that we got to talk to you on, brother, before we get out of here on this week's episode of The Big Boys with Uncle Neely and Coach Carl Reed. Heisman Trophy. Everyone has been realizing what Travis is doing is extra special. You got running backs out there breaking records, but we've seen running backs break records before. But what you see Travis Hunter doing on both sides of the ball, being in the top three of receiving, being in the top three of defensive back, and now his quarterback is also beginning to emerge in the discussions, as he should have been all along for Heisman. Could be two buffs sitting there in New York City.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what, Coach Prime has been telling me for well over a year that this was gonna happen, that they were both gonna be in New York, and they've played like it. People don't get a real appreciation for what Travis Hunter is doing until you see it up close and personal,
Hmm.
as I've had. He never comes out of the game. And he's playing at such an extremely high level. He's not tired. He's not fatigued. He may take a break on a special teams change or a play here or there. But I mean, I've never seen a guy in that kind of physical condition. And when you're talking about the quarterback position, week after week, guys have been struggling all throughout the country. Shador Sanders has been nothing but consistent. He can make every throw. He's an incredible leader, and he has not seen a defensive coverage that has rattled him. He's always making the right decision.
Yeah, I would challenge the voters out there to look deep because when you really evaluate Shador Sanders' numbers, yes, on some particular weekends there's a QB out there with more yards. Yes, on one weekend there may be a QB out there with more touchdowns. But when you look at his percentage of completion, you look at what he's doing, keeping his team in games and staying ahead. Because let's be frank, there are a lot of quarterbacks out there who get their teams out of trouble, but it's the very trouble that they put their team in the first place. Shador Sanders never puts his team in trouble. His right hand man out there, Travis Hunter, 103 snaps, and he's on the field for 100 of them and making an impact. Even this past week at Texas Tech, the quarterback avoided him rightly so all game. Got it offsides, had a free play, went at Travis on that play, and he got an interception, although the penalty negated it. Travis just takes control of the game. He's absolutely the best player in college football this year.
Well, when you think about Shador Sanders, there's quarterbacks around the country that people say set the world on fire. What makes Shador Sanders special is he can come in and put the fire out. And so that's very, very elite what he does there.
I love that. The fireman. Finally, Coach Reed, before we get out of here, I know a guy and you know a guy that his first collegiate coaching stop at Jackson State won back-to-back Coach of the Year. I'm talking about no other Deion Sanders, Coach Prime. Took over a program in Colorado, 1-11, took it to 4-8. Right now, as we have this conversation, he sits at 7-2. Why are we not hearing Coach Prime, Coach of the Year buzz?
We will hear more as the weeks go on. You know he has a lot of haters, man, and you know it's a lot of people that hate to have to admit when they're wrong. He was attacked so much that people hate to have to come back and say, "Man, you know what? I was wrong." Most people won't do it, but all he has to do is keep taking care of business, and it's gonna be a special time. It's gonna be a lot of hardware in Colorado this season.
Absolutely. We are going to continue to take care of business here at the Big Boys. Coach Carl Reed from 24/7 Sports, Uncle Neely from the Pregame Show. This is the Pregame Show Network. This episode again is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create your an account, use the code BUFFS. Coach Reed and I are going to take $20 off your first purchase. Can't beat that with a stick, as we say back in Mississippi. Coach Reed, we're gonna get through this Utah game, and we're gonna tap in next week, brother.
No doubt. We'll see you next week, guys.
Much love.